Hey everyone, CPO here, and today I'm upgrading my intercooler again. So as we get started on this, I do want to say there are several really great YouTube videos already out there on an intercooler install in a Mark 7 or a Mark 7.5 MQB platform. In particular, one from ShopDAP, Deutsche Auto Parts, and another one from Humble Mechanic. They actually take two different approaches. The method that Paul uses in the Deutsche Auto Parts video removes the intercooler from the front, and the method that Charles uses in the Humble Mechanic video removes the intercooler from inside, like up and out the top or the bottom. They both have their pros and cons, but the removal from the inside requires you to drain the radiator and also remove it. So if you don't want to mess with that, you can use the method that Paul does in the Deutsche Auto Parts video, removing it from the front. Both of them require you to remove the front bumper cover, so you're not going to get away from that regardless. I actually used tips from both of those videos in preparation for doing my install because Paul and Charles are both very detailed in their videos, and they both show different elements. So because of that, I'm not going to recreate a full install. I'll time warp through a lot of this content, but I will stop and make sure I point out things specific to me. For example, I had to bring out the Dremel and cut on a bracket for my AC condenser. So yeah, I'll explain that. So because I'm upgrading an already upgraded intercooler, my process may be a little bit different than if you were working with the factory intercooler. So those things are probably going to be pretty obvious and easy to spot. My current intercooler that I'm taking out is a Revo, and I've been very happy with it up to stage 2. I'm running somewhere around the 400 horsepower range in this car, and it's been great. I'm upgrading my turbo soon, and what I want to do is just increase every potential place of flow that I can. So I upgraded the downpipe, I'm upgrading the intercooler, pipes bigger, like more flow is what I'm going for. And this do88 intercooler has the most flow of any of them, and it also cools very well. I'll also show you how the do88 and the Revo and the factory R cooler sort of compare side by side. I'll show you the different measurements later on in the video. All right, let's get to this. So as I'm going through the process of removing the current intercooler and installing the new one, it pretty much went exactly as expected. It wasn't hard, it was just tedious. There were a lot of little things, clips and connections and fasteners. I just took my time and it all worked out well. And yes, I'm wearing a headband. I got to keep that hair out of my face, and sometimes wearing a hat is just annoying. So hairband to the rescue, don't judge me. So the first step is getting the front bumper cover off and everything that goes along with that. I did another video when I installed the Aerofab front splitter, and I went into more detail about removing the bumper cover, so you can watch that if you need help, or Charles or Paul's videos also cover that. I will say it's one of those things that definitely gets easier the more you do it. So these little crash sensor plugs are on both sides of the radiator. They have a little red tab that needs to be pulled so you can press and remove the plug. I used a flathead screwdriver to push the red tab open on the passenger side, but I could easily reach it by hand on the driver's side. So there's a little tip for you. The center guide is held in with 3 screws and it clips in on each side. I ended up removing the air ducts so that I could better see those clips. The passenger side I could push with a screwdriver, but I ended up using a little small pick tool for the driver's side just because I couldn't get to it with the screwdriver because of the way the AC condenser was. Here's a look at that little thing you're trying to press whenever you release those clips. Then I unplugged the ambient air temp sensor and both of the horns. I then removed the front screws for the core support brackets and loosened up the rear screw. I didn't remove it completely. And then next I disconnected the hood latch cable. I decided to show this in a little bit more detail because it was tough to see in some of the other videos. So the bumper carrier is held into place by these 2 nuts up top, and then there's 2 screws that screw in sideways on each side, and then 4 large bolts on each side that hold it to the frame. So for these side screws that hold the bumper carrier to the lock carrier, there's one below and one above, and you can get to those on each side. But in order to get these top large bolts for the bumper carrier, I needed to loosen up and lift the headlights out of the way. So there's a screw on the side for the headlights. I loosened that one up, didn't remove it completely. And then I also loosened up the screws holding the inside corner of the headlight to the lock carrier. Now I can lift the headlight up. I had enough clearance to remove the bumper carrier bolts. I left one bolt in on the one side while I went to the other side and removed all of the other bolts. And then once I got all that done, I could come over, remove the last bolt, and good to go. It's surprisingly lightweight. I thought it was going to be heavy, but it wasn't at all. When it comes to removing these plastic support brackets, I found that twisting with a large flathead screwdriver while pushing the plastic clips in worked well for releasing them for me. I've heard these are easy to break, so I actually bought some spares just in case to have on hand, but thankfully I didn't need them. I used my mechanic stool as a support for the whole assembly, and that worked really well. It was a perfect height for where my car was sitting at the time on the lift, and once I got it supported, I could remove those screws on each side that were holding the entire thing in place there at the corner of the headlights. There were a few more clips holding the intercooler to the radiator, and once I got those freed, I then went down and removed the silicone hoses at the bottom of the intercooler. I slowly worked everything open, pivoting from the passenger side and working around the headlights. Because this was an aftermarket intercooler, I also had to unscrew the brackets holding the air conditioning condenser to the intercooler, but soon it was free. Here's a look at the size differences between the intercoolers. This stock Golf R intercooler is about 35 millimeters wide. The Revo is 50 millimeters wide, and the do88 is 58 millimeters wide. It's pretty hefty and heavy too, by the way. Before I can install the new do88 intercooler, I need to add foam tape to each side along the welds. This tape comes in the kit, so you don't have to worry about finding it. There's just enough with a little to spare for each side. And then there's another small piece of foam that needs to go inside the little mounting tabs on each side. I then removed the mounting brackets from the other intercooler since I didn't break them, and then put them on the new intercooler. And these only go one way. They're sort of keyed to fit a certain way, and you can't really screw this up. Then with a little scrub of a fluffy dog, we're ready to install the do88 intercooler. I know it seems like a cop-out to say that the install is exactly the reversal of the removal, but that's what it is. It's a puzzle that goes back together the same way you took it out. With that said, I did have to modify the upper passenger side bracket tab on my AC condenser. It was too tall to slide into place and also allow the bottom tab to fit in its place. And the instructions that came with the intercooler were for an older model car that didn't really go into this. So I cut this little section, and that allowed the tab to fit into the slot on the intercooler, and then allowed me to insert the screw that's there to hold it all together. It wasn't hard putting it all back together, it was just tedious, wiggling and shifting, slowly getting things to line up. When you tighten the headlights, there is some room for adjustment so that the headlight lines all match the body lines. There was an adjustment screw at the inside corners, and if you leave those alone, you can use those as a guide for tightening everything back up in the same position that it came out. Make sure you tighten everything down, plug everything in, and then double check it. I did find after the assembly was complete that I had a little bit of a wiggle and an associated rattle where the AC condenser attaches to the intercooler. I used a hammer to gently bend the lower tabs a little bit and also tap the bracket on the intercooler closed some more. And the combination of those two things put enough tension on the mounting points so that the condenser didn't rattle anymore. I'm not sure if that's a common issue, but it was an easy fix. Before putting the bumper cover back on, I installed the new intercooler hoses that came with the intercooler. And once you put the bumper cover back on, it's really hard to double check your work. So take one last look at everything and make sure it's all good. Then the cover slips back into place and you can button it all up. Well guys, that wraps things up. I hope you found the video helpful or at least somewhat mildly entertaining. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.